From that moment on, Huyen carried herself differently. She wasn't suddenly fearless, she was still human. There were still nights when her mind spiraled, when she imagined worst-case scenarios, when she worried about Maya being exposed to more conflict. But there was a new strength underneath all of it, like a backbone she hadn't fully claimed before. The fear was still there, but it wasn't driving anymore. And while Huyen was rebuilding herself from the inside, D was doing what he always did, showing up. He didn't make a big show of it. He didn't announce grand plans or talk tough just to sound brave. Instead, he moved quietly and steadily, taking care of what needed to be done. He double-checked the preparations. He handled the details. He made sure their small ceremony would still feel special. And at the same time, he stayed alert, ready to protect the peace they were trying to create. Because they understood something that Huyen was only just beginning to accept. Sometimes the only way out is through. He knew there was a chance the ex-mother-in-law, or someone influenced by her, might try to show up and cause trouble. He knew the rumors could turn into confrontation. And he wasn't naive about how quickly a happy day can be ruined when someone comes determined to destroy it. But he also knew they couldn't spend their lives living around other people's anger, so he prepared not out of paranoia, but out of love. He stayed calm, but he was ready. Ready to set boundaries, ready to stand between Huyen and the chaos if needed. Ready to defend their right to move forward. And that quiet kind of protection, the kind that doesn't need to be loud to be real, became part of what gave Huyen her strength back. Because when you know someone is truly with you, you stop feeling like you have to fight the world alone. As the wedding day drew closer, the tension didn't vanish, but Huyen's mindset became clearer. She began to understand that her happiness didn't need permission, that her past didn't get to be the headline of her future, that the people who wanted to keep her stuck were not the ones who had to live her life. And then, in the final scene, everything comes together in one powerful image. Huyen stands in front of a mirror. The room is quiet. The world outside is still full of voices, some supportive, some cruel. But for a moment, it's just her. She looks at her reflection, and you can see both emotions in her eyes at the same time, anxiety and courage. She's still worried, still aware of what could go wrong. But she's also stronger than she was before. Not because the fear is gone, but because she's decided it won't control her. It's a look that says, I'm scared, but I'm not running. For so long, Huyen's instinct was to avoid conflict, to stay small, to retreat whenever the past tried to drag her down. But this time, she makes a different choice. This time, she chooses to face it head-on, to walk into her new life with her head held high, even if people are whispering, even if someone tries to ruin the moment, even if the past shows up one last time to test her. Because this isn't just a wedding anymore. It's a turning point. It's Huyen reclaiming her story. And as she stands there staring at the woman, she has become the survivor, the mother, the partner, the fighter. You realize the real victory isn't whether the village approves. The real victory is that Huyen is finally choosing herself. This time she's not running away. She's walking forward. Hey everyone, hope you're having a great day. Huyen and Dee's wedding was supposed to be simple. Small, quiet, and filled with love. But nobody expected what happened next. Someone from Huyen's past suddenly showed up. And she didn't come with congratulations. She came carrying resentment and a plan to ruin everything. With just one rumor, the whole village started whispering. With just one threat, the happiness Huyen and Dae have fought to build over the last 2 years suddenly felt like it could collapse overnight. So now the question is, can their wedding still happen the way they dreamed? Or will the past drag Huyen back into the darkness she worked so hard to escape? Because it all started the moment Huyen's ex-mother-in-law found out she was getting married again. When Huyen and Dee first started talking seriously about having a small wedding, they never imagined the news would travel beyond their own little circle. In a close-knit neighborhood, though, nothing stays private for long. What began as a quiet plan between two people quickly turned into something the whole area seemed to know. Someone mentioned it casually the way people do, and before Huyen could even realize what was happening, the good news had made its way to the last person she ever wanted hearing it, her ex-mother-in-law. And the moment that woman heard the word wedding, everything changed. It wasn't just surprise on her face. It was anger, instant, sharp, and unmistakable. Her expression darkened like a switch had been flipped. In her mind, Huyen wasn't a woman trying to rebuild her life. Huyen was the villain in her family's story. The person she blamed for everything that went wrong. For years, this woman had been holding on to one version of the past, one narrative she told herself again and again until it became truth in her head. In that story, Huyen was the reason her son's life fell apart. Huyen was the reason he ended up drowning in debt. Huyen was the reason his family broke down and his future collapsed. And because she had decided that Huyen was responsible, she also decided that Huyen didn't deserve peace. So when she heard Huyen was about to remarry, about to start over, about to be happy, it felt like an insult. Like Huyen was getting away with it. Like she was walking into a fresh beginning, as if nothing had ever happened. And that was something this woman couldn't tolerate. To her, it didn't matter what Huyen had suffered. It didn't matter what Huyen had endured or how much she had changed. It didn't matter that life had moved on. All that mattered was her bitterness, her pride, and her need to be right. In her eyes, if her son had to live with the damage of the past, then Huyen should have to live with it too. And that's the part that makes this situation so tense, even for an American audience. It's not just family conflict, it's someone refusing to let another person heal. It's the kind of resentment that doesn't fade with time. It hardens. And when it hardens, it turns into something dangerous, a desire to punish, to control, to ruin. The ex-mother-in-law wasn't simply upset. She felt threatened. Because if Huyen could rebuild her life, it meant Huyen wasn't broken. It meant Huyen wasn't guilty the way she wanted her to be. It meant the world was moving forward without her approval, and that made her feel powerless. So instead of processing her feelings like a normal person, she chose the one thing she still believed she could do: interfere. Right there in that moment, she made a decision. She told herself she couldn't allow this wedding to happen. She couldn't let Huyen walk into a new life with her head held high. And she certainly couldn't let the neighborhood celebrate Huyen's happiness. Not after all the blame she had assigned, not after all the anger she'd held on to for so long. So an idea began to form, cold, immediate, and relentless. She would stop it. No matter what it took. It didn't matter if the wedding was small. It didn't matter if it was humble. Even if it was just a few family members sitting around a table, she wanted to tear it apart. Because to her, that wedding wasn't just a ceremony. It was proof that Huyen was moving on. And she wasn't ready to let that happen. From that moment on, the happy news of a simple wedding was no longer just about love and a new beginning. It became a trigger, a spark that lit an old fire. And in a village where rumors spread fast and people talk even faster, Huyen and Dae were about to learn how quickly a quiet dream can turn into a public battle. Because the truth is, the hardest part of starting over isn't always the work. Sometimes it's the people who don't want to see you rise again. And now, with that one-word marriage, the past had officially come knocking on their door. She didn't confront Huyen directly, not at first. Instead, she did what people like her often do. She went quiet on the outside and started working behind the scenes. It began with a few innocent conversations. She dropped by to speak with distant relatives, then stopped to chat with neighbors who were always eager to hear the latest news. She didn't have to raise her voice or make a scene. She just planted seeds, carefully chosen words wrapped in fake concern. The kind of gossip that sounds harmless until you realize what it's actually doing. She brought up old stories from years ago, stories most people had either forgotten or never truly knew in the first place. And then she twisted them. She hinted that Huyen had abandoned her husband. She implied Huyen was selfish, careless, and responsible for everything that went wrong. Worst of all, she began to attack Huyen's character in the ugliest way possible, suggesting that her past wasn't clean, as if a woman's worth could be reduced to rumors and shame. None of it was fully true. But that's how the most dangerous gossip works. It's never completely made up. It's half-truths mixed with exaggerations, just enough maybe and I heard to make people believe it. It's the kind of story that spreads fast because it gives people something to judge, something to whisper about, something to feel superior over. And in a small community, once a rumor takes hold, it moves like wildfire. Before long, those whispers reach the marketplace, Huyen's everyday world. The same place where she used to feel familiar and safe now felt different. She started noticing the stares. Conversations would pause when she walked by. People would look at her, then quickly look away. Sometimes she'd catch her name being said under someone's breath, followed by a low laugh or a quiet comment that stopped the second she turned around. At first, she tried to brush it off. Maybe she was just being sensitive. Maybe she was imagining it. But day after day, that feeling grew heavier, like a tight knot in her stomach that wouldn't loosen. Huyen didn't know where it was coming from. Nobody said anything directly to her face. Nobody owned up to it. And that made it worse. Because when you don't know the source of the poison, you can't stop it. You can only feel it spreading around you, closing in from every direction. It started to affect the way she moved through the world. She walked a little faster. She spoke a little less. She kept her eyes down more often than usual, as if making herself smaller could somehow make the whispers disappear. Even simple tasks, selling tomatoes, buying groceries, greeting a neighbor, began to feel stressful. She wasn't just doing her daily routine anymore. She was surviving the judgment in the air. Inside, her anxiety kept building. She didn't want to ruin the happiness of this moment by overreacting. She didn't want to bring negativity into their home while they were planning a wedding and trying to start fresh. But she couldn't ignore how it felt to be watched, to be measured, to be silently accused. And it wasn't only about embarrassment. It was fear. Because Huyen knew what gossip could do in a village like this. Rumors don't stay rumors for long. They become truth in people's mouths. And once a story like that sticks, it can destroy relationships, opportunities, and reputations, especially for a woman. She had worked so hard to rebuild her life. She had fought for stability, for respect, for a sense of peace. And now it felt like someone was trying to rip that away without even showing their face. Dee noticed the change before Huyen ever said a word. He saw it in her eyes, the way her smile didn't reach them anymore, the way she seemed distracted, even when she was sitting right beside him. He noticed how she would go quiet in the middle of a conversation, like her mind had drifted somewhere darker. He noticed how she hesitated before going out, like she didn't want to face the world. At first, he tried to bring it up gently. He asked if she was tired, if something happened at the market, if anyone had said something to upset her. He didn't push, but he didn't ignore it either. Because when you love someone, you recognize the signs. You can tell when something is weighing on them, even if they insist they're fine. But Huyen didn't answer. Not because she didn't trust Dee, she did. But because she didn't want to speak the rumors out loud. Sometimes saying the words makes them feel more real. Sometimes it feels like repeating the gossip gives it power. And sometimes when you've been hurt before, your first instinct is to protect the people you love by carrying the pain quietly on your own. So she stayed silent. She smiled when she could. She nodded when Dee asked questions. She kept moving, kept cooking, kept working, kept doing what needed to be done, while inside her uneasiness grew larger every day. And that's exactly how the ex-mother-in-law wanted it. Because this wasn't just about telling stories. It was about isolating Huyen. It was about making her doubt herself, making her feel ashamed, making her feel like she didn't deserve to be happy. It was about shaking the foundation of Huyen and Dee's relationship without ever having to confront them directly. In a way, it was strategic. Cruel, but strategic. Because if you can turn a community against someone, you don't have to fight them yourself. The community does it for you. The stares become the weapon. The whispers become the pressure. The silence becomes the threat. And now, with the wedding getting closer, those whispers weren't just background noise anymore. They were the first cracks in the dream Huyen and Dae had been building for 2 years. Huyen could feel it. Dae could see it. But neither of them knew yet how far this was about to go. The rumors weren't enough for her. Not anymore. Out of nowhere, Huyen's ex-mother-in-law showed up at their doorstep, bold, uninvited, and ready to start a fight. There was no warning, no polite greeting, no attempt to keep things private. She walked straight into their space, like she had every right to be there. And the moment she opened her mouth, the air in the house changed. In front of the whole family, she raised her voice and dragged the past back into the room like it was something she could throw at Huyen and use as a weapon. She repeated old accusations, speaking like her version of history was the only version that mattered. And then she made it clear she wasn't there to talk, she was there to threaten. She declared that if the wedding went forward, she would show up and tell everyone the truth. Not just the couple, not just the family, she said she would tell the entire village. It wasn't about honesty. It was about humiliation. It was about standing in public and trying to destroy Huyen's name on the day that was supposed to be the happiest of her life. The room froze. Little Maya, sensing the tension and hearing the anger in that woman's voice, immediately got scared. She didn't understand every word, but she understood the feeling sharp, hostile, unsafe. She pressed herself into Huyen's lap, clinging to her mom, as if she could disappear into her arms. Her small body tensed up and her eyes filled with fear. A child shouldn't have to witness that kind of cruelty, especially inside her own home. Huyen's face went pale. You could see the shock hit her first and then the hurt, then that familiar panic rising in her chest. The kind that comes when you realize the past isn't just a memory anymore. It's standing right in front of you, trying to drag you backward. She looked like someone who had worked so hard to rebuild her life, only to see it threatened in a single moment. Ditho stayed calm, not because he wasn't angry, but because he refused to give her the reaction she came for. He held himself steady, but his eyes told the truth. There was a firm line in his expression, a quiet warning that he wasn't going to let her control the situation. He didn't shout, he didn't lose his temper, but the determination in his gaze was unmistakable. "This is my family now, and you're not going to tear it apart." After making her threat, the ex-mother-in-law finally left. But she didn't just leave the house, she left behind a storm. The kind that doesn't end when the door closes. The kind that lingers in the silence afterward, in the trembling hands, in the heavy breathing, in the way everyone suddenly feels smaller. Once she was gone, Huyen broke down. All the anxiety she'd been carrying from the rumors, the stares, and the whispers finally spilled over. She wasn't just upset, she was overwhelmed. She started thinking about Maya, about the shame, about the village gossip, about the possibility of their wedding day turning into a public disaster. And in that moment, her instinct was the same one so many people have. When they've been hurt too many times, she wanted to run. She told Des she wanted to cancel the wedding. Not because she didn't love him, not because she didn't want a future with him, but because she was scared. She was tired. She didn't want more drama, more pain, more people judging her. She didn't want to put Maya through any more stress. And she couldn't stand the thought of the happiest moment of her life being turned into something ugly. In her mind, canceling felt like protection, like control, like taking away the ex-mother-in-law's power by removing the target. But Day didn't let her disappear into that fear. He reached for her hand, steady, warm, unshaking, and held it like he was anchoring her back to the present. His voice was calm, but what he said hit with real force. He told her he wasn't marrying her past. He was marrying who she is now. In that one sentence, D did something powerful. He separated Huyen from the accusations people had thrown at her. He separated her from the shame others tried to attach to her name. He reminded her that she is not her worst moments. She is not her mistakes. She is not the version of her story that bitter people tell to make themselves feel better. He made it clear that he sees her strength, her growth, her love for Maya, her resilience, her heart. And he wasn't going to let anyone rewrite that or reduce her to gossip. Dee's message wasn't just romantic. It was protective. It was mature. It was the kind of love that doesn't flinch when things get hard. The kind of love that chooses the person in front of you, not the rumors behind them. And in that moment, something shifted. The wedding stopped being just a celebration and became something deeper, a stand, a decision, a boundary, a statement that this family is not going to be ruled by old bitterness and public judgment. Yes, the past had shown up at their door. Yes, it had tried to scare them. But now the question wasn't whether the ex-mother-in-law would cause trouble. The real question was whether Huyen and Day would let her. And with Day holding Huyen's hand, looking her in the eyes, and choosing her anyway, it felt like the answer was finally becoming clear. In the days that followed, the gossip didn't magically disappear. The whispers were still there, floating through the neighborhood, showing up in side glances, lingering in the quiet pauses when Huyen walked by. Even when people didn't say anything out loud, she could feel it. That pressure, that judgment, that old story trying to rewrite her life again. But something inside Huyen began to shift. At first, she moved through each day with a tightness in her chest, like she was bracing for the next blow. Every trip to the market felt heavier than it used to. Every conversation felt like it might hide a trap. And yet slowly, almost without noticing, she started to breathe again. She started to steady herself. She started to remember who she was. Because the truth is, fear can become its own kind of prison. And Huyen had lived in that prison long enough. One evening, as she sat with her thoughts, it finally clicked. If she kept letting other people's opinions control her, she would never truly be free. She would spend her whole life reacting, hiding, shrinking, apologizing for things she didn't even do, carrying shame that didn't belong to her. And the worst part, the past would keep winning. Huyen realized that running might feel like protection in the moment, but it would also be surrender. It would mean the people who wanted to break her could do it without even touching her, just by spreading words, just by pointing fingers, just by turning her life into a story for others to judge. And she wasn't willing to live like that anymore. So she made a decision, quiet, firm, and final. No matter what happened, the wedding was still going to happen. Not because she wanted to prove something to the village, not because she needed anyone's approval, but because this was her life, her love, her second chance. And she refused to let bitterness from someone else's past steal the future she was trying to build.